So let's meet in Tadasana and look down at the feet, bring them parallel as gauged by the second toe, and then anchor the big toe and ever so gently allow the thighs to spiral open. So the knees should be pointing forward. That's a great gauge of the muscles in the legs being on and supporting you. And then I'm going to turn just so you can see this movement. Send the hips back, float the arms forward for chair pose, and take a couple of pulses like this. And I invite you, without changing anything, to just notice how the legs are interacting with one another, and how as the hips sink back, there is this sense of support catching them, right? So you feel stability in the back of the pelvis. And the next time you come into chair, come up just about halfway so you're not so deep. Shift the weight into the right foot, get a little bouncy in the right leg, and make sure you're anchoring the right heel down. That's what's going to keep the pressure out of the knee, right? So you don't want to feel really any sensation in the knee. Start to circle the left foot behind you as the left arm mirrors the leg. And do this a couple of times. Might start to feel challenging on the right leg. You can take a break at any time. Try to keep the right leg completely unmoving, so it's just the left leg and left arm. And you might not go as far. Yeah, that looks great, Mom. Nice modification. And then we'll try the other side. So step the left foot out. You can keep the feet wide. We'll do a moment of chair pose and then come out of it just so that left leg is engaged. And then shift the weight into the left foot and start to circle the right foot behind. Remember, we don't want anything to move besides the arm and the leg, and this creates a lot of stability. See if you can start to feel that sensation of the inner thighs drawing up into the pelvic floor and the deep core. And then once you've got the hang of this movement, we'll go from side to side. So just stepping into a short straddle, bending the knee, and sliding the opposite foot behind. As you get more comfortable here, you can make the movements bigger, but that's not necessarily the goal. So just pay attention to what feels enjoyable in your body and try not to push or overdo any of these movements. The next time you come over to the right, we're going to add on. Shift the weight forward into the right foot and start to extend down into the right leg so that you can hover the left foot into tree, letting the foot land wherever's comfortable, just making sure the knee feels comfortable. And then let's try that a couple times on that same side. So the front knee bends, the leg slides out, and then push down into the front leg to weightlessly lift that leg. We're using this action, so maybe the left foot actually doesn't even need to land on anything because all these muscles are awake and ready to support us. That wasn't the plan, but it's feeling really fun. We can call that like weightless tree. And then let's try the other side. So the leg steps out, go over, and then once you feel ready, you can play with shifting the weight and letting that right leg get very light. And remember, it doesn't matter how high the right leg lifts. Instead, it's the feeling. We want this effortless feeling of feeling weightless and almost like, ooh, as I lift the right leg, my spine could get longer. Take one more. And then step the right foot out. Turn the toes forward if they're not already. And gently bend the knees a little bit. Start to hinge forward at the hips, melt the spine. The hands can stay on the thighs for this first round, or if the body's craving it, the hands can slide a little lower. Just make sure the spine feels supported and there's no pressure in the neck. Bend and extend each leg so the hips can sway. And then push evenly into both feet. We'll roll up in the way that we've been practicing. Send the weight back into the heels, anchor the big toes. Inhale, gather energy, sweeping up and overhead, and then exhale about halfway through. And let's take 2 more of these. So bend the knees, melt forward. That's your inhale. And then exhale to draw the legs together, connecting with that feeling of lightness and ease. Doesn't matter how far you bend. Just try to feel a fluidity and ease. And the next time you're up, pause there for a moment. Almost imagine that the body is dissolving and you're just a flow of energy. And we'll build on to our sequence. So shift the weight into the right knee and start to glide the left foot behind you, and then go right into that bounce. Pause here in tree as I demo the next thing. We're going to be playing with going back into our curtsy, but instead of going right into tree, we'll actually be stepping out towards a Virabhadrasana 2. And I want it to be a really small step so that the joints feel really nice and supported when you do that. So from wherever you are, let's meet in our curtsy. We'll do 1 tree, and then we'll play with that step. And make sure it feels nice and easy. There's not like a thud, right? So maybe it's a teeny tiny Vira 2. That's okay. And then once you've found your stance, make sure the left toes are turning out and there's weight in the left heel. Play with bending the left knee and swaying over the left leg, and then pushing into the left heel to rise up. And if you want to sync this with your breath, I'm playing with inhaling as I go into it and then exhaling for that leg drawing together lifting motion. I didn't practice any certain arms here, so you can do whatever feels right, but I'm naturally feeling inhaling, this reaching out, and then that exhaling, drawing everything up. So it is sort of similar to the arms we've been doing, actually. And the next time you come up, bring equal weight into both feet. Feel that sense of the legs gently drawing together to lengthen the spine, and use it to sway side to side. It's almost like a volcano where the energy is rising up and expressing itself through your movement. And then turn towards me, and we're going to allow the feet to turn out slightly and pause for a moment in goddess pose. Shift the weight from heel to heel, trying to feel the musculature up from calves to hamstrings to the back of the pelvis. So you feel a lot of support, not just from the base of the pelvis, but the back of the pelvis as well. You can sway or hold steady. And then before we do the second side, we'll turn the toes forward, and 1 to 3 of these gathering forward folds that we did before. I say 1 to 3 so you can move at your own pace or pause anywhere that feels good. And the next time you're up, bend into the left knee, start to sweep the right leg behind, right arm reaches, and then we pulse into our tree. And then back to the curtsy. This time we practice our stepping out nice and small. It might be a different size than the other one, and try that a couple of times. Less is more. But once you've explored it, you might feel like, oh, no, I want a little bit more, and then it's okay. Once you've found where the right foot wants to land, look at the back toes. Let them come in just a little bit here. And then equal weight in both feet as you bend the right knee and start to sway the spine over to the right, and then kick into the right leg to rise up. To add the arms in, we reach out as the knee bends, and we draw everything in and up as we come up. I'm naturally inhaling into the movement and then exhaling up. There's no right or wrong as long as you're breathing. And the next time you're up, turn the toes out for your goddess pose and allow the hips to start to lower, but think of the crown of the head lifting. So even though the hips are lowering, the spine is like getting longer and longer. If it feels okay, you can shift the hips from side to side. Bring your awareness to your sits bones and imagine the sits bones almost like drawing slightly towards one another. When I do that, I come out of the pose slightly and there's even more length in my spine. If it feels good, you can play with letting the feet come wider. Imagine you're just trying to take up as much space as possible in all directions. Nice. And then turn the toes forward. And let's actually heel toe the feet all the way in. We'll do a gathering forward fold from Uttanasana. 1 to 3, depending on your pace. Feel free to pause in the forward fold or anywhere else. And the next time you're up, let the arms release. We're going to go through that sequence one more time. I invite you to pause anywhere that feels really interesting. We'll have the option to add on a balancing pose, but you don't have to do it. This is sort of your time to play with all the strength and upward moving energy that you've cultivated. So let's start by stepping the feet out, bending the right knee, curtsy to the right, into tree, back to the curtsy, and then play with your step out. And you can take a couple of those if you want to, and you get the nice bending into the knee. And the next time you're up, option to pause in Virabhadrasana 2 like we did before, taking those side to side movements. Or if you want to play with Urdhva Chandrasana, bend into the knee just like we did before, shift the weight and play with letting the back foot float. You can take a couple of those, or if you're feeling solid, you can stay there and breathe. Make sure to keep the big toe down and anchored, and then you can allow the hips to open, stay springy in the left knee. As you're ready, the right foot will come down. We'll meet in Goddess, and here we take up space. Remember, it's not about stretching the feet as far apart as possible, but really drawing the energy up into the spine so you feel very supported. If you can't move, it means you've gone too far, but I can see all of you, you're moving beautifully. And then toes forward. Let's just do one gather of energy before we do the second side. Nice. And then the right knee bend. Oh, left knee bend. Curtsy. Tree. Back into the curtsy, into our step out with control. Then you melt over the leg and then kick into the leg to come back up. And the next time you're up, you can play with your side to side Vira 2 or bend into that right knee, shift the weight and get as light as possible. Even though the left leg's up, think about the legs drawing together to create that flow of energy up the spine that we've been playing with. Make sure you're breathing. And then eventually left foot comes down. We meet in our last Goddess. And we really have done a lot of work to create our support system here in Goddess. So enjoy it, play with it. You can play with where the feet are. can change the angle of the feet, the angle of the knees. We're not going for a stretch sensation, but rather a sense of feeling really supported. If you want to add on here, you can add a side bend is really nice. And again, it's that same idea of taking up space. So you're always reaching and lengthening. And then we'll turn the toes forward and we'll come into our last forward fold. So that you can take your time here. Your hands can come onto the legs, the floor, whatever feels supportive for you. Make sure you're breathing. And again, notice how the legs can work together to help you lengthen the spine here. Take a couple more breaths. And then gently lower one knee at a time. So here, kneeling. Bring the hips to the heels. And I didn't have you guys bring blocks. I want to do one malasana. So if you need a block to do malasana, feel free to grab one. But just because we have done so much to create this support and lift, we'll play with a shifting malasana. And so one knee lowers as the hips shift to one side. You want to make sure that the knees feel supportive here. So the hips can be on a block if it's too much on the knees. And the reason we're moving is it keeps all the muscles in the legs on so we don't just dump into our joints. And see if you can feel that sense of the legs uniting to lift the spine. And then eventually we'll lower the hips all the way down and send the feet forward.